All right, let's dive into one of history's greatest puzzles. We're talking about a huge, super advanced civilization that built these incredible cities, and then, poof, they just vanished from the history books for thousands of years, leaving us with way more questions than answers.
Okay, just picture this. At its height, this civilization might have had over 5 million people. 5 million! They lived in these sprawling cities with unbelievable engineering, amazing sanitation systems, and trade networks that stretched for miles. And then, they were gone. So the big question is, how does a civilization of that size just fade away? We are talking about the Indus Valley Civilization, sometimes called the Harappan Civilization. Now, this society was flourishing for almost 2,000 years. It was right up there with ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia as one of the three great, cradles of civilization. But here's the catch. Unlike them, the Harappans didn't leave behind a Rosetta Stone or epic stories about their kings and gods. Their entire history is basically locked away in a script we still can't read.
So before we can even begin to tackle how they disappeared, we've got to appreciate what they actually built. How did this incredible society even come to be? And what did they pull off during their golden age? You can really break down their history into three main parts. It all started with these small farming towns that just grew and grew over centuries. But the real fireworks, the explosion of culture and tech, happened during what we call the mature Harappan phase. For about 700 years, starting around 2600 BCE, they were at the absolute top of their game.
And listen, when we say this civilization was big, we mean it. Archaeologists have found more than 1,000 cities and settlements. I mean, think about that. Over 1,000 sites spread across modern-day Pakistan and northwest India. We're talking about a territory that was bigger than ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. The scale is just staggering.
And this wasn't just a random collection of villages. Not at all. These people were masters of craftsmanship. They had trade routes that went all the way to Mesopotamia. But the thing that really blows my mind? Their standardization. From the bricks they used to build their homes to the weights they used in the market, everything was uniform across this vast area. That tells you this was a highly organized, deeply connected society.
And you can see that organization best in their engineering. I mean, this stuff wasn't just impressive for the Bronze Age. In some ways, it was more advanced than anything that would be built in that part of the world for thousands of years.
Get this. The Indus Valley people engineered the world's first known urban sanitation systems. Just stop and think about that for a second. We're talking sophisticated sewer and drainage networks that, unbelievably, were more efficient than what you'd find in many parts of that same region today. Their cities were basically a blueprint for how to live in a city. Everything was laid out on a perfect grid. Most homes had their own private wells and bathrooms, and all the wastewater flowed into covered drains that ran along the main streets. This wasn't just about making life easy. This was about public health on a massive, organized scale. This little ratio here, 1 to 2 to 4, it might not look like much, but it's huge. It represents the standardized dimensions of their baked bricks, thickness to width to length. Finding this exact same ratio at hundreds of sites, hundreds of miles apart, well, that's just incredible. It suggests there was some kind of central authority or universally accepted system for construction that spanned their entire civilization. And this is where they get really different. While the Egyptians were busy building gigantic pyramids for their pharaohs, and the Mesopotamians were putting up huge ziggurats for their gods, the Harappans, they were building for the public. We find zero evidence of giant royal palaces or massive temples. Nope. Their biggest buildings are things like public baths and granaries. It really suggests a society that cared more about civic life and maybe, just maybe, was a little more equal. But for everything we know about their cities, the people themselves, they're like ghosts. And that brings us to the really juicy stuff, the big, unsolved questions that still keep historians up at night. The biggest mystery of all has to be their writing. They left us a script, but what on earth does it say? What stories of their lives, their beliefs, their rise and fall are locked away in those symbols? We just have no idea. We've found hundreds of these unique symbols, usually in these really short little phrases on tiny seals. But without some kind of bilingual text, like a Rosetta Stone, it has stayed completely silent. It's truly one of the great unsolved puzzles of the ancient world. And of course, there's the ultimate question. What happened to them? For a long time, the popular theory was that they were wiped out by some kind of Aryan invasion. But modern archaeology has pretty much thrown that idea out. The evidence just isn't there.
The leading theories today point to the environment. A slow-moving climate change, rivers drying up that they depended on for farming, maybe some catastrophic floods. All of that probably made their big cities impossible to live in. People likely had to move on, adapt, and their whole society just transformed.
Their disappearance was so complete, they were totally forgotten for thousands of years. So how do we even know about them today? Well, the story of how they were rediscovered is almost as fascinating as the civilization itself.
For centuries, these incredible cities were just buried under the dirt. The ruins of one city, Harappa, were noticed by a traveler in the 1840s. But then, tragically, in the 1850s, engineers building a railway line just carted off countless ancient bricks to use for the tracks. I mean, they were literally destroying priceless history without even knowing it. It wasn't until the 1920s that real excavations started, and an archaeologist named Sir John Marshall absolutely shocked the world by announcing the discovery of a totally unknown Bronze Age civilization.
This quote from the lead archaeologist Sir John Marshall really says it all. When his team found these little, finely detailed statues, the artistry was so good he had trouble believing they were prehistoric. He thought, there's no way these could be 3,000 years older than classical Greek art. It just flipped everything people thought they knew about ancient art completely on its head.
So what's the legacy of this lost world? Well, their ideas about city planning are still incredibly relevant. We can actually see little bits of their culture that survived and popped up in later societies in the region. And most importantly, finding them completely rewrote the history books. It proved that a complex urban civilization was thriving in South Asia thousands of years earlier than anyone had ever dreamed.
The Indus Valley Civilization is just this incredible reminder that our history isn't some finished story. It's a book with a ton of missing chapters. From their silent script to their abandoned cities, they really force you to wonder, how many other great human stories are still out there, buried right under our feet, just waiting to be told?